So today I just want to start with acknowledging that I'm on Lutruwita, Aboriginal land, and I'd like to acknowledge with deep respect the traditional custodians of this land, the Palawa people. I want to pay respects for elders past, present and emerging, and to the Aboriginal community that continue to care for country. I stand for a future that profoundly respects and acknowledges Aboriginal perspectives, culture, language and history, and a continued effort to fight for Aboriginal justice and rights, paving a way for a strong future. Thank you everybody for joining us today. And for those who don't know, I'm Darlene McLennan and I'm the manager of the Australian Disability Clearinghouse on Education and Training, ADCET for short. Today we're really excited to have Jim Sprialis present to us. Jim is an inclusive education and technology consultant and has been a leading influence on the field of inclusion and technology for over 30 years. Jim is a great supporter and friend of ADCET and of the tertiary sector as a whole. I've worked with Jim now for many years. Jim today is presenting a webinar on Glean, but he also presented a webinar in August 2018, and I still can't believe it was that long ago. It just feels like yesterday. So if you haven't had a chance to check out that webinar, I encourage you to go back onto, you can see on our website, under webinars, you'll be able to find Jim's a few pages back now. So today Jim, as I said, is going to showcase Glean, which is a web-based app that is designed for cognition. But before we start, just a few housekeeping details. This webinar is being live captioned by Bradley Reporting and it will be recorded. The recording will be available on ADCET in the coming days. If you haven't used Zoom before and wanting to activate the closed captions, you can click on the CC button in the toolbar, which is either at the top or the bottom of your browser. You can play around with that caption box to make the text bigger, larger, etc. We also are providing a link to a browser where you can have the captions in your browser. If you have any technical difficulties today, you can email us at admin@adcet.edu.au. Jim's going to speak to us for around 40-45 minutes, but he has got a lot of slides, I warn you, but I will be keeping him on task and on time. At the end of the presentation, I will be asking questions of Jim that you have had put to us throughout the presentation. So if you would have any questions for Jim and want me to ask that at the end, please put those in the Q&A box. In that box you can also click the like button, so that kind of then puts questions more up to the top for me to read them. So it's a great way of staying engaged in what the Q&A are. The other thing is that there's a chat pod which we can actually talk to each other on that chat pod. So if you want to kind of shout out and say, hi, here I am in South Australia, hi, here I am in Tassie, feel free to do that. But please choose all panellists and attendees so everybody can see. Also, participants are getting really good at sharing things throughout a presentation. So if Jim mentions something or whatever and you know of a link, throw it in the chat pod to keep us all connected and communicating throughout the presentation. Okay, I think that's it. So now, Jim, I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Darlene, and welcome to you all, and thank you so much for taking time out under these incredibly trying conditions to join me and Darlene in bringing up to speed with developments with note-taking. And yes, as Darlene mentioned today, I want to share with you Sonocent's latest addition to note-taking tools. It's a web app approach to helping students take better notes. And we know research shows that the better notes students take, the better grades they can achieve. So, but for those of you, this is going to be our agenda for today, because there may be some of you who may not be familiar with my work with Sonocent, and even though it's been around for quite a few years. So I do want to spend very briefly, just a couple of minutes to make sure everyone's on the same page about the history of Sonocent and how very early on that history has actually influenced and continues to influence our innovation in note-taking. Then we'll have a quick discussion about some of the things we found over the many years around note-taking and learning retention, and that information has been gathered from our engagement with disability advisors around the world and students, who are really our most our most important people we listen to, because student voice is very important in us determining the directions of technology to suit their needs. There will be a quick demonstration of Glean itself, which I'm really excited to do. I've only came up to speed with Glean about 4 weeks ago, and from my very first experience with it, I was just really amazed how it's, and hopefully you'll see it in this webinar, how it's one of those technologies that is intuitive, seamless, and it doesn't get in the way of what you actually want to achieve with the tool. And then we'll talk at the end a little bit about how Sonocent has offered Glean, free access to Glean for the remainder of this year to any higher education institution in the country, and also in New Zealand. But just briefly, I just do want to talk about our timeline of Sonocent, so those people who aren't aware of Sonocent get a bit of an idea of our background and historically our core business around note-taking. So it was founded in 2007 by Dave Tucker, and by 2014 it actually became the most recommended technology in the UK, assistive technology in the UK. The next year it was launched in North America, and though it's not on the timeline, I do want to say that in 2016 is when it was launched here in Australia, and we've got very broad uptake of Sonocent Audio Notetaker, including of course in the US, where it's become a very popular tool to support students who have note-taking accommodations. And over those years we've gathered a lot of information and realised that it is they're very powerful assistive technologies, but we do want to take a new approach from all that data we've gathered, and that's why our vision for this year in 2020 is to release the web app called Glean, which has now arrived. But I do want to give you a bit of a history lesson first from how Sonocent came about. You can see on the screen here some very interesting images of things that were very popular in 2005, and I never had a pair of those, but I'm wondering whether someone in the audience did have a pair of those very fashionable UGG boots that were all the rage in 2005. And it was around the same time that Nokia started to release quite a broad range of their smartphones, which was starting to mesmerise us. But one other thing happened in 2005, and that was the founder of Sonocent, Dave Tucker, was starting at a university as a lecturer. He had a background knowledge and experience working for Hewlett-Packard as an audio engineer and speech processing research. And he found out when he went to the university that in 2005, a lot of students were receiving assistive technology through the Disability Students Allowance, the DSA. And he found that of the students who received laptops, 80% of them also received a digital voice recorder to support them with their note-taking. Now, if there was one thing that Dave knew about audio, is that it's not really a very accessible format. You can have hours and hours of audio recordings that you've taken from lectures, but then to go back over and listen to them, how do you access them? How do you access the actual information that's layered in that audio? Certainly there's this one long timeline, and in the past, students would have had to navigate to precise moments along that timeline to find that key information they need to review. Some students probably could have gone to overkill and used some audio editing software and pulled out and edited it and just pulled out the bits they want. But again, very time-consuming way to go about and review the notes. Nowadays, I know we do have lecture capture recordings, and again, they still are on a timeline where you have to rewind and play back, although they do have the video, the audio and visual information to correspond with it. But again, it's still time consuming. Darlene mentioned a previous webinar recording last year, and in that recording we did mention that when students with dyslexia go back and review a lecture capture recording video, that 1 hour recording can take them around 2.5 hours to review. So really there needs to be another way. So Dave Tucker came up very quickly with this. So in 2007, when Sonocent was launched, this was Accessible Audio was born. That's actually the actual name of Sonocent Audio Notetaker. Its first name was Accessible Audio, and what Dave has done, he made sure that the software would visualize all the audio into those colored bars, and the gaps between them were silence. In the very first version, he added the ability to add notes, but immediately what's happened here is we've got this very transient modality that is audio, and Sonocent gave it a very tangible interface to work with. So it enabled greater concentration, it enabled actually greater interaction. Rather than being a passive listener, you now had to more actively engage in a more active listening comprehension mode and do some annotation. And we know that when you're doing some annotation with any sort of notes, it's a purposeful act that actually activates learning. Okay, and of course the notes are much more better organized like this. And over the years, those of you who are familiar and those of you who already have Audio Notetaker, this is what it has now become. The ability to add slides was also a feature that came in, additional versions of Audio Notetaker, with the addition of the apps, companion apps for mobile devices. So that's a bit of a history so you can understand that today's session about Glean, its roots lie very heavily and consistently in the way that Sonocent has developed technology to support note-taking. So over those last 13 years, we've learnt quite a lot. We've engaged with disability advisors, equity staff, the students themselves, as well as conducting hundreds of case studies and pilot projects with institutions around the world to gather this information. And we've learned quite a bit from it. One of the things we've actually learnt a lot about is peer note-taking and note-taking support, and how much harder it is getting for universities to manage that support. Administration time can be very high. The fact that sometimes the peer note-taker, the quality of notes might be unreliable. There's obviously a budget required for it in terms of the cost to deliver a peer note-taking program. But more importantly, I think the biggest value or the biggest loss, I think, is for the students themselves who require that support. They rely on others, and so they do not really develop learning independence, which is really a lifelong skill that's going to be needed once they graduate. Sometimes too, the notes were perhaps not necessarily of high quality either. Some students who are dedicated peer note takers make an assumption, and so the notes can be quite thin in terms of complexity and value. And so in a way, the poor notes were still there, and of course that led to students still acquiring poor grades. So we know this over the key things we've learnt is that, for all of us, it's a very frustrating process to take notes, and that note-taking has a very important role in terms of learning retention, because we know that the more frequently you review your notes and repurpose your notes, synthesize the information, that's going to have a much bigger impact on your final attainment grades. And I'm sure many of you would have received a comment from students that you support who recount to you some of the frustrations they have with note-taking and some of the stress they convey to you about that. Interestingly enough, for many students who are independently taking the notes, they're only capturing 35% of the lecture information, which really sums up really why a lot of students are not getting the grades that perhaps they should be getting. So 65% of that information is going to waste, and this was from a study from note-taking in the Cambridge Handbook of Cognition and Education. So there's a link there to the paper on that one. So when notes are incomplete, we know that they lead to poor grades, and when you review and repurpose frequently, that's really integral to that learning retention process. And at George Mason University, when they actually utilised Audio Notetaker last year, and students started to take more effective notes that were purposeful, that can be repurposed as well, they saw an improvement in grades in 89% of students who took up the assistive technology. And in those previous webinars on the ADCET website from last year, there's additional information from various pilot projects we've conducted that reinforce that sort of information and that data about the improvement in outcomes from note-taking. So that also has a big impact with online learning, with students in this current crisis we have as well. It's undoubtedly a much more challenging learning environment for students. This global pandemic has created quite a significant emotional drain for both the students and for you who are supporting the students. But we've just found that in our education, the goals are the same for us, in helping the students remain focused, working towards their assessments, making learning a more active process, sustaining that concentration where it's really challenging, especially with remote learning, and making sure we can scaffold the process or to take really good notes. But importantly, repurposing that content afterwards into really good study guides that help them with preparing for assignments or for exams. So just quickly now, let's talk about the two types of students. I'll just go back one, who have a dilemma. Some students enter a lecture or tutorial and feel compelled to try and write down everything in class. Okay, they don't want to miss anything. But once they start writing things down, it means they might miss out on asking questions or even participating. On the other hand, to fully engage in the class and listen without taking notes means the student, yes, at that point in time, in that moment, they are engaged because it's too distracting for them to take their notes. But of course, after class, they haven't got comprehensive notes to return to and synthesize for their learning. So it is difficult to do both at once. And we've even found that can be a challenge within Audio Notetaker. And we find that many students who use any sort of form of assistive note-taking technology do try to minimize the amount of typing, amount of writing they put into the technology, into the app or the software, because if they try to write too much, then they're relying on working memory for the spelling, the phrases, and they're tuning out of what's actually being spoken at the time. So that's why we've designed Glean. After a decade of working with disability advisor students, we think we've come up with a really good answer on it. This is a screenshot of Glean, and I'll go into a demonstration shortly, but I'm hoping your screen resolution is high enough to see that. At our first impression, it's a very minimalist view of a technology, and we've made that for a number of reasons. We really want to make sure that the technology didn't get in the way, that it was intuitive, and to reduce cognitive load. So the vision for us is about using the technology for students to become better learners and improve their learning outcomes, and also want to make it easier to adopt the technology. A lot of assistive technologies are very powerful, very enabling tools. Some, more than others, still rely on some support in training and induction to use the technology, and then a little bit more of ongoing support to start to utilize the technology for different strategies in your learning. And that can have a big impact on how how effectively students leverage the technology. So the way we've designed Glean, we've made it that it can be adopted very quickly and almost instantly by students. Now, the emphasis is actually on the note-taking and not the technology. And it can still capture everything. So this will not surprise those of you who are familiar with Audio Notetaker. As I said, Sonocent has this vision of how note-taking should be tangible, visual, interactive for that engagement, and Glean's no different. So it does capture everything, your audio, your slides, and the text that you do wish to put in if you do so. It can be used in a lecture theatre tutorial, wherever there's in a room with a group, but it can also be used online, and this is perhaps a good opportune time to think about using Glean if your students continue to use remote learning, because it can be used to stay engaged in the moment with online streaming lectures, or to go, if a student missed the lecture, to go and view the recorded lecture and use Glean to start to engage with the content. It can also be used in a blended mode. So that means if the student would like to have their spoken information recorded, they can use the blended mode because they're part of an online tutorial or online discussion where there may be multiple speakers at different sources. So Glean will capture everything. Nothing will be missed, and it will all be recorded within the app in real time. And of course, students go back and review it later. So what we're going to do now is we're going to have a quick look at Glean. And as you can see, because it's a web app, it can work in Windows, Mac and Chrome. So it does use the Chrome browser. So I'm just going to quickly flick over to Chrome for a moment. Just quickly, where are we? So hopefully on your screen now you can see Glean open in one of my tabs, and you can see that there are listed 3 recordings. Now, one of the things I'd like to do is I'm just going to move the video out of the way so I can see things there. You can see that on the top right hand corner in the purple bar there's a little icon of a cloud. So everything is synchronized to the cloud through Google services, all encrypted. So students' recordings are safely stored for access at a later date, anywhere, anytime. The app will also record if there isn't a tick box there to say there's an internet connection, because students can use Glean in an environment where there's no internet connection. It will record within the browser, and then once a student gets into a space where there's some internet connection, it will then synchronize the recording to the cloud. So students, I see that as a form of accessibility in a way, because there are so many other useful web apps that students may use in their learning, and they tend to drop out and won't work for them in some sort of situations. Well, we've purposely made sure Glean does not have that issue and can be used anywhere, anytime, regardless of internet or not. So this is a student account. When you send an email to your student to invite them to use Glean, they'll click the link, create a password, and it'll instantly open up to this page, which will be blank. But by default, what will show up on the screen is the introductory video. So I'm not going to play, it's a 2-minute, 20-second video. So the first thing students get is an instant induction into the program, and it gives an overview of how to use Glean. If students wish to, because it's a web app, there's always a dynamic link to the help section, and in the help section you'll note that students can actually perform a search. So that's another advantage for Glean being web-based, is that everything is continually monitored, updated at the back end by the support staff and developers. They can log what sort of things students are searching for, and also adapt some of the resources if need be. So it's all linked with videos, quick 30-second videos of how to do different tasks in the app. But we'll come back a bit further with this to talk about other features at a later date. So I'm going to actually click on New Event to show you what it looks like when students first decide to record a lecture. And here it is. So on your screen you can see a very clean, very minimalist interface, distraction-free. It's been designed like that to support cognition and to make sure students can focus on the content and not have to focus on all the complexities that a tool may have on the screen. Okay. So you'll notice that there are some familiar features that are like Sonocent Audio Notetaker. There is the ability to import slides prior to the lecture. So I might actually do that now to show you what that looks like. And we'll import the presentation. And here you can see on the left-hand side, we have our slides. And we can navigate through the slides as we're recording the lecture. Okay. I'll just go back to the beginning. I'll give this one an event name. Let's pop it in as Physics 101. In the column next to the PowerPoint slide, this is the feed that will accept the audio recording. But over in the far right hand side, there's a very long column that goes the full length of the screen. And it says your notes will be shown here. So how the interface has been designed, it's a bit more like almost like a social media feed. So the far right hand side where the text notes are typed, that will start to become a timeline, and students, it will feed in their notes. So to show you that actually in action, I'm just going to click on the record button to start recording my voice. Now, before I do, I'm going to click on the little drop-down chevron underneath the microphone button. And here now you can see the two other options for recording in different contexts. So the record screen audio, that's the option you would choose if you want to record from a webinar or a pre-recorded lecture, or even from a YouTube video. The bottom option, record screen audio and mic, you would choose that one in a blended learning situation where the student would like their own utterances to be captured and recorded in the software. But for now, I'm just going to choose the standard recording option to record as if I'm live in the lecture. So when I press the record button, you'll notice now that it has automatically put in slide 1 in the audio feed, and also slide 1 in the text feed. And as I come to something important, I can start to type some quick notes to say that this is critical for the exam, or it's critical concept. And then when I press the enter key, it will now post that into my feed on the far right hand side. So as I go along, I can also click the important button to say something's being said that's important. But before we do that, let's go to the next slide. And now you can see I'm going to click on post slide, and now slide 2 is posted, where we talk about the timeline that's really important about how time travel concepts have been developed. So you can see I can add text, or I can also choose just to click on the icons and have just icons go in. Now, I'm not sure if you noticed, but I'm going to, in about 3 seconds, click the review button. All right, 1, 2, 3. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but I clicked the review button, but what Glean automatically did was it placed that review icon 15 seconds back from that point in time. That is a purposeful feature that's been added into Glean. Research shows that for some students there's processing delay that can go up to 15 seconds in time. So by default, Glean pops that icon 15 seconds prior for students, so that way when they click on it later, it will play back something that they may have sort of been processing but didn't realise it was important until later. Okay. The other part about it, I'm going to post to slide 3, and you can see now when I click post slide, it's now actually putting information about slide 3, and I can pop a task in there as well that I have to catch up to later. I can add notes later. Now, one of the big things that happens in lectures quite frequently is the lecturer doesn't always present in a linear fashion. They've perhaps started to speak about slide 3, but then decided that they want to revisit the previous slide and add more information. So let's assume the student is now recording on lecture 3, as you can see on your screen, and then the lecturer goes back a slide and starts talking to that previous slide. What we can do here is we can actually go back a slide and repost it. And now you can see there's slide 2 up at the very top, slide 3 underneath it. But now here we are again with slide 2, where the lecturer is expanding upon something from that previous slide. And then when the lecturer goes back to slide 3, we can post it again. And now everything being spoken to this slide is correlated with the audio. So I'm going to actually stop the recording there for a moment. Actually, no, before I do that, I would like to talk about lightning mode. So for some students, we said that to reduce cognitive load, we want them to stay engaged in the moment. There is lightning mode, where it's now in keyboard shortcut mode. So when students hear something important, they can just press number 2 on their keyboard, and now it's added 15 seconds before that point in time, a highlight of that task. If I've heard something I need to review later, I can now press number 3, and you can see it's popped that in as well. I'll flick it back to text note, because the other option is, of course, for students to use a backslash, and they can, if they'd like to stay on keyboard, because they still want to type words, they can use the backslash and then press the R button and press enter, and that'll pop it in. Or they can create their own actions with the backslash, because it will start to develop a history. So I'm just going to stop the recording there, and now I'm going to take it back to here. And you can see that I have my recording Physics 101. It's currently being synchronized with the cloud, so that should be finished in a moment. Let's say the lecture has now finished. I've gone home from the lecture, and it's time for me to review my notes. So here's a sample of notes that were taken during the lecture. You can see that we've got our important icons in the audio feed. These match the text notes on the feed notes. I can actually go, and here's some words. I've clicked on impossible. It will now take me to the bit of spoken information where I type that key word. And the beauty of this seamless interface is that I don't have to go and navigate and find the 3-minute 50-second mark to play back that something about the impossible concept. I just click the word, and it will highlight the bit of audio to do with it, and I can just play that bit of information.
Time travel remained at the margins of both popular culture and serious science for much of the 20th century.
And likewise, if I click on Interstellar, it will take me further down my audio feed to show me that. So when the students get home, they can now go through all these notes, and they can populate more information. If this important icon needs to be shifted because I don't need it 15 seconds beforehand, I can actually adjust the positioning.
There'll be more information on that. So if you've ever watched...
Stop that. I can adjust the positioning of it. Alternatively, what I can do is I can bring up the slide in bigger view, because what we want to do is make sure we can adjust it but enter more than just one line of text. We really are mindful that sometimes students might see a single line and start to stay in that mode of just doing short phrases. We do want to then have them, encourage them to come and expand the text box and populate that with more information. So here a student go through at their own pace, navigate through all these different elements where the key information is, review their notes, expand upon their notes, listen back to what was captured and reword it and word it in their own way. So by the time they go through the feed with all the notes, this is what the notes could be looking like when they're finished. So the finished product will show their populated text on the right, and this is now where students can start to develop those lifelong study skills and repurpose their notes for assignments or for preparing for lectures. At the bottom you'll notice something called Reading View. If I click on Reading View, it will now show a document listing a screenshot of all the PowerPoint slides and all the notes that the student created underneath each slide. And from this point in time, the student has three options. They can go and to the print icon, and from here they can print a hard copy. Alternatively, the destination can be a PDF or saved to Google Drive as a Google Doc. The students can also copy this to the clipboard, and everything that's been copied here from the clipboard can be pasted into a Word document that will have the same formatting as seen on the screen. So that gives you a bit of an idea of the very minimalist way that Glean looks. As students use the app over the course of the semester, obviously they're going to populate quite a lot of recordings or events, as we call them here, and to help with more efficient navigation and search of their content, students can actually perform a search of a keyword. Let's just pop in perhaps relativity. And you can see it's almost like a Google search. It will search through all the cloud-based content that I have in my account and find all the occurrences of the word relativity, including specific notes as well as slide titles. So if I click on H.G. Wells' novel Time Machine, it will now open up that recording, and it's taken me straight to that passage of text with that search in it. So that's the demonstration part of the program I want to show you. I will now flip back to my PowerPoint. Before I do, before I go back to the PowerPoint, I will say that to record an online lecture, and a lot of our students are doing that now, when they do choose to record from screen audio, what will happen is it will ask them, I might just go back and do a new one so I don't interfere with that one. This screen will come up to ask them to show which window they want to record from. So we don't want to record from the entire screen because then that will be problematic when you want to take notes, but we do want to use a Chrome tab. So we can select the tab that has the webinar recording. You can see here in this instance, if I had set this up at the beginning, I could actually have started to record this Zoom event that you're all attending by having it captured from here. Okay, making sure I choose the share audio option. Now, prior to doing this, it's important to know that the Zoom meeting would be in a new window rather than just a new tab in my browser. So I would need to go to File and New Window, and then I can record from that window. Okay, I'm just going to head back to the PowerPoint. And here you can see a screenshot showing how a video is being recorded, an online lecture is being recorded in split screen mode. So the student has got a nice clean interface with Glean on the left hand side, and viewing the person presenting their information on the right-hand side of the screen. So you can see how this interface, even when you look at this, how the distraction is minimized, and it can enable that scaffolding process for students to react to the moment and concentrate on the video content. And then because they have done that, they can go back to it later and review very good quality notes. There are some other advantages to having Glean as a web-based app. Because it's web-based, it means that you can take advantage of Chrome extensions. So I will quickly flick back just to demonstrate some of these because they can be quite dynamic. So here we are in our events. If I go back to cancel that. And bring up our recording, I can take advantage of some of the Chrome extensions. So for example, the Open Dyslexic font. If I choose to use this one, not only will it change the font of my notes, but it will also change the font of the actual, of Glean itself. So you can see Glean's headings are also in the dyslexic font. I'll just turn that one off for a moment. We can also take advantage of something like Dark Reader. So if I click on Dark Reader, what will happen here is that it will invert everything within Glean for students to start to work through like that. So that's another advantage with something like Glean, in that it can take, students can leverage additional Chrome extensions. There are others that we've come across that seem quite useful. There's one for called Read Aloud, so that way students actually can have text in the text feed read to them. We've also found Copyfish, which is a free OCR app extension. So there are times when students, maybe prior to the lecture, they would might like to, because that's an embedded image that it can't use the screen reader, they might like to use the OCR app to have that read to them. Although it's my understanding that, I'll talk about accessibility in a moment, that Glean is fully screen reader compatible, and I'll come to that in a moment.
So Jim, it's just at the 1:45 mark now, so 1:43. So.
And how much time do we have left, Darlene?
Oh, so you've got 15 minutes, but that includes the questions. We've got quite a few questions, so probably another 5 minutes.
Okay, yep. Okay, I'm nearly ready to wrap up then with the PowerPoint. I'll just flick back. Okay. Also, I noted there's a couple of another app extension I found called Speech Recognition Anywhere. It is free for, I think, 30 days to trial, but I found that you could dictate into your text notes with it. And I found that the text notes in Glean are fully full controlled text boxes, so you can actually ask Speech Recognition Anywhere to delete the last 3 words and so on. So you have got full control with dictation and navigation within Glean with that. Okay. So just to reinforce, it's a bit like driving a car. We want to be able to make sure we can focus on that, and if we've got, we make sure that we have a very simple interface, so that way there's some automaticity to our function and our way we work, with reducing all the distraction, making sure we've got the smallest amount of attention, and make sure we focus on the content, not the tools. So I can talk about some of the access platforms, but I can say that, for example, that it has, Glean has got WCAG at the AA level, and it's something that you can find more information on the website. The other thing I wanted to quickly mention, of course, is that it is free to use till the end of the year. And it's a good opportunity for you to design a pilot project about, and have some inquiry questions about the sort of things you'd like to learn more about and how note-taking can be better addressed within your institution. So there's the link to with information about the Australia-New Zealand free use, and my email address is also on this screen. So here are some questions that I anticipated you may ask. So I might just answer these, Darlene, and that way we can then go to other questions that I haven't addressed. So we usually get asked, is there going to be a mobile app? Yes, there is. Just as there was with Audio Notetaker, the mobile apps are expected in the coming months. So hopefully August, but we can't give a precise date on that. Cloud storage, well, that's unlimited because it's actually just based in Google, and there's unlimited storage for students to keep their recordings. Likewise, because they're stored in Google with the Amazon cloud service in the European Union, it's all encrypted, and privacy and security is very high priority with Sonocent. I mentioned before there is screen reader compatibility, including full keyboard navigation as well within Glean. The two other questions we get asked, transcription. Will transcription perhaps be a feature? I know it was one that was recently, I was frequently asked of us with Audio Notetaker. That was always going to be tricky to try and do it with software and other software to talk to each other. But with Glean, what we're hoping, of course, is because Glean can link with other web-based services and apps, as I demonstrated just a moment ago with some of those extensions. We anticipate that there will be Chrome extensions that will offer that transcription service as technology improves. And so because Glean is a web-based app, it's going to be well positioned to be able to enable transcription services to tap into Glean. And the other question we asked is about from our existing universities that have Audio Notetaker. It won't replace Audio Notetaker. Audio Notetaker is a very robust assistive technology that has a specific purpose. It has some other very robust features that software tend to have. For example, it has the ability to extract key information, make that into summarized study guides. It has the ability to have all noise reduction, noise cancellation. It does dovetail with Dragon for transcription if you wanted to. So it won't be replaced. It still is a tool that's highly valued and still highly used by many students. But Glean is just another offering where for many students, including students who across the whole campus have a UDL tool that they can utilise for their note-taking. So at this point in time, Darlene, I guess, yes, we can take some questions.
Fantastic, Jim. Thank you for that. The challenge is I was trying to look at the questions and not listening to you. I do apologise. I did listen to some of the answers. Can you just go back on the privacy and security answer? Did you answer that? The question is, how do you respond to privacy concerns about recording lectures and class discussions without consent? It's awkward for a student to ask the class for consent, and academics have concerns about privacy for themselves and the class being recorded. So you may have answered that.
That's a recurring question, and that's more to do with the permissions put in place and the agreements put in place between the institution and the student. Various universities have different policy on that. I always go back and refer to, because I live in Adelaide, I refer to Adelaide University's policy where the students sign an agreement and it's been negotiated with lecturers, and that's put in place that those lecture recordings are only for personal use, and there are conditions that they can't be shared. And that's actually going to be quite easy to accomplish with Glean, because recordings can only stay in the student's own account, so they can't actually export them out and share them with others anyway. Unlike Audio Notetaker is a software program. The students make recordings, and that they're advised not to share them, but if there is that ability to do it in the software if they chose to do that. So it's stored within Glean, within the web app, and it's all encrypted. But it's the permissions that you really need to go back to. So perhaps everyone here today, sorry to throw this to all the wonderful people at Adelaide Uni, but if you'd like to speak to the people at Adelaide Uni, they could certainly give you some information about how they go about addressing those permissions for students to use.
Brilliant, excellent. We might even put that out on the Ofsted list and get them to, or we might even do an article on it. There we go. Yeah. We're kind of getting a good rating system go. People are putting thumbs up against the questions they want answered next, which is great. If this software is free for the rest of 2020, why would we purchase licenses for Sonocent for semester 2?
As I said before, I think those students who are used to using Sonocent, it does have some other specific features that Glean doesn't have, like being able to strategically extract audio to make talking books or make summarized videos from it. Some of the noise cancelling features in Audio Notetaker are not available in Glean. They might be in the future, but the two being based on audio engineering, the similarities with Glean and Audio Notetaker are that they both have built-in volume boosting, so that way if a microphone perhaps is not the best microphone, that both technologies compensate for that to make sure you get a very good, clear, loud signal. But of course, that signal will include background noise, and at the moment Audio Notetaker can have additional features to filter out keyboard clicking, background noise and that sort of thing. So for our students with auditory processing challenges or with a milder form of hearing loss, that's Audio Notetaker is still going to be quite relevant for that group of students. But as I said, there are many students who have taken Audio Notetaker and it's got so many other not complicated, but additional features that require cognitive load, but those students who manage that well get the best out of the software. So I think it's a really conversation back with your students to see how successful and how happy they are using Audio Notetaker.
Okay, excellent. Because also
I see in the long-term future, I probably see a bigger rollout of Glean, but there will always be those students who will want some additional things that Sonocent Audio Notetaker offers.
That's great. It probably answers, there was a question around how you help making that decision between the two. Yeah.
Yeah, and it will continue to be supported because Sonocent views them both as having advantages, and so it's coming back to that feature analysis and then working out what best matches that individual student.
Yeah. Now the big dollar question, what will the fees be for Glean once the free period ends?
Yeah, so when the free period ends, it's there'll be very similar rollout to Audio Notetaker, and so in terms of numbers, so when you buy 25 licenses or you buy 50 or 100, the pricing goes down, very similar structure to Audio Notetaker. It's probably, I haven't got the figures in front of me, but it's about 15 to 20% dearer than Audio Notetaker. So it changes very drastically. So if people would like a table, I'm happy to put that somewhere. I think actually you can find it on the website. I haven't got it on me, but it's in US dollars, and it changes on the day exchange rate each day.
Okay, but it can be found.
About 20%, it's about 20% more than Audio Notetaker. For those of you who have Audio Notetaker, that gives you a rough idea.
Excellent. Can students adjust recordings after the event instead of during or before? And this is probably an example for somebody who's watching an interpreter. So at the same time.
Adjust them in what way? Could you clarify that?
I suppose I'm wondering if it's more around that making those notes prior, during, or because I didn't ask the question. I didn't itself. I suppose I would see how you're going through and you're making that's important, or review that. Yes. I suppose if you've got the recording there, you could still do that afterwards if you are watching the interpreter instead of. Yep.
Yes, you can always go back and edit your recording, but at that point in time, you're capturing that, and you can change change all that afterwards. The actual recording, the audio stays there intact, but it's actually how you might go back and highlight different parts of it, and then decide to add new notes in the feed, because in the end, it's the feed that's going to be the value, because that's what you need to do the next step in your learning.
Yeah, excellent. Does Glean only work within the Chrome browser and sync with Google Cloud?
Yes.
Yep, thought that. It's got a few likes for that one. So, does it have a read function for students within students' written text, or would you do that in a Word doc?
The Chrome extensions can be used that, so there are, I had quite a few shown my tab and I didn't explain any of them, but there's so many Chrome extensions where you can select text in that feed and it will read it back to you.
Yeah. How accurate is, I mean, you just spoke about it, dictation, issues with jargon and unusual names and stuff. Have you had any experience with that?
I've only tried that one called Speech Anywhere 365, and that was quite impressive. Obviously, if someone has Dragon, they could, I'm guessing they could actually dictate in those boxes, because as I mentioned before, I found full text control when I used that free Chrome extension. So if I had full text control in the box with that, I'm pretty sure you'd have it with Dragon as well. So if a student dictated something, they could actually correct within that box immediately.
Okay. Someone was saying, is it possible for a disability assistant to create notes this way and share it with students? And I would think that is something that, you know, anybody can use it. I've used Sonocent when I've been in at conferences. So.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I suppose it's what you want to share afterwards. With Sonocent, yep. You could share the recording, so you have the audio, or just the text notes. Whereas with Glean, you'd only be able to really share the text notes because the recording is secure within that student's account.
Yep. There's a question, I suppose that was relating to the privacy one around, will it collect students' questions and discussion during the class?
That's a good question. I'm just going to go back into my notes, and I might just turn off Dark Reader actually, if that's okay.
Yep.
And we might just quickly go back to the help section here, because everything that we can do it. Here's the help section here. So let's just do a search. Was it for privacy?
Yep.
Or was it more security, I guess?
Oh, that one was a bit, yep.
Okay, I've got a feeling we might need to type in security. Okay. I'm sure I saw somewhere else.
Okay, but there is a good answer, question and answer section,
so
people could try that.
And well, the security and privacy is very high on Sonocent's list. I've actually got a link to a document, and if you wish, I can actually give you that link to put with the upload of the files for the webinar.
Yep, brilliant.
Yep.
So we've just reached our, we've reached our time now, Jim. So do you want to go back to your presentation and share your contact details? Yes. If we didn't get to any of the questions, we will negotiate with Jim to answer those, which will go on to the page where we've got the recording and the presentation. Which is great. Just a quick plug, ADCET has a webinar next week with Microsoft, so you can find that information on our website. So thank you, Jim. I always get blown away and wish I had, you know, more hours in the day to play with the technology, but it's been great to see the leaps and bounds of, you know, and well, I suppose just, looking at how things can be improved with assistive technology, and I think for students it's really important to see this improvement for many students. So we've had great feedback, great questions, and once again thank you for your time and passion and showcasing it.
Yes. And just finally, if anyone there wants to go back to their colleagues and share this about Glean and would like to have a follow-up, I'm very happy to organise a Zoom meeting and answer more questions if you've got them from your team. Thank you.
Excellent. Have a great day, everybody, and hopefully we'll catch many of you next week. See you later.
Thank you. Bye-bye.